Welcome to Gone But Remembered. I'm Jessica. Today, we take a quiet moment to reflect on the lives of those who are no longer with us, yet remain deeply present in our memories. Their kindness, talent, and spirit touched so many. As we remember them, we keep their legacy alive in our hearts. Van Hammer, born Mark Ty Hildreth, has died at the age of 66, leaving behind a complicated but memorable legacy from the world of professional wrestling. Before entering the ring, he grew up in a structured environment and later served in the United States Navy, an experience that helped shape his discipline, physical conditioning, and mental toughness. After his military service, he transitioned into wrestling, training under experienced names like Boris Malenko and Dan Spivey, and made his professional debut in the early 1990s. He became best known for his time in World Championship Wrestling, WCW, where he was presented with a rock star-inspired persona that emphasized charisma and stage presence. During this era, he competed against several well-known opponents, including Mick Foley, and gained attention from fans as part of wrestling's more theatrical period. As the industry shifted, his character evolved as well, later aligning with Raven's flock under Scott Levy, adopting a darker and more intense role. While his career saw moments of visibility and momentum, it also experienced periods of decline, and he eventually stepped away from active competition. Outside the ring, his life included personal challenges that affected his public image, but many wrestling fans still remember him as part of a unique and experimental era in WCW history, where larger-than-life characters and evolving storylines defined the sport's identity. George Sagal passed away at the age of 87, and around 5 years later, his work continues to be remembered for its warmth, humor, and emotional range across film and television. He built a long career where his performances often felt natural and unforced, making his characters easy for audiences to connect with. Early in his career, he earned an Academy Award nomination for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, a demanding dramatic role that showed his ability to handle intense and emotionally layered storytelling alongside some of the strongest actors of his time. However, he was never limited to serious roles. His easy charm and comic timing allowed him to move comfortably into comedy, where he became just as memorable. Many viewers came to know him later through the television series Just Shoot Me, where his wit and relaxed screen presence stood out, and in his later years he reached a new generation of audiences as the affectionate grandfather figure in The Goldbergs. Across decades of work, his legacy is not only defined by awards or specific roles, but by the consistent sense of authenticity he brought to his performances, making characters feel grounded and relatable in both comedy and drama. 15 years ago this week, the world quietly said goodbye to Farley Granger, who passed away at the age of 85. For many viewers, his name is still closely connected with the tense and unforgettable atmosphere of Alfred Hitchcock's films. In Strangers on a Train, he portrayed an ordinary man who becomes trapped in an unsettling and unexpected situation, drawing the audience into a slow-building psychological conflict. In Rope, he was part of a bold storytelling experiment that unfolds in real time, creating a sense of continuous tension that feels almost unbroken from start to finish. Beyond these well-known roles, Granger was recognized for a subtle and understated style of acting. He didn't rely on exaggerated expression or dramatic gestures. Instead, he brought a quiet realism to his characters that made them feel grounded and believable. His performances often carried emotional weight in a restrained way, allowing viewers to connect with what was left unsaid as much as what was shown. Over time, his work has continued to resonate, not only as part of classic film history but also as an example of how effective simplicity can be in storytelling. His presence on screen had a natural sincerity, and even in calm moments, he managed to hold attention. Farley Granger's legacy lives on through performances that remind audiences that impact doesn't always come from intensity. It can also come from restraint, subtlety, and truth in the portrayal of human experience. Singer and songwriter Chip Taylor has died at the age of 86, leaving behind a long and quietly influential career in popular music. While his name may not always be instantly recognized by everyone, his work has been part of the soundtrack of multiple generations. He is best known as the writer of Wild Thing, a raw and energetic song that became a major hit for the Troggs and later found new life through many covers and cultural references. He also wrote Angel of the Morning, a song that reached wide popularity and became especially memorable through Juice Newton's version, which introduced it to a new audience years later. Beyond these well-known tracks, Taylor created a wide range of music that reflected his emotional storytelling style and strong sense of melody, including songs like Early Sunday Morning and Big River. Born James Wesley Voigt, he was also the younger brother of actor Jon Voight, though he built his own identity through music rather than relying on family recognition. His influence is not only found in hit records, but also in the way his songwriting continues to be discovered and appreciated by new listeners over time, keeping his creative legacy alive well beyond his lifetime. Few figures have captured the essence of cinematic freedom and timeless allure quite like Brigitte Bardot. Born on September 28, 1934, in Paris, she rose from a young, aspiring performer to become one of the most recognizable and influential faces in world cinema. Her presence marked a turning point in film history, where natural charm and authenticity began to redefine screen stardom. On screen, Bardot brought something fresh and unforgettable. Her performances felt effortless and alive, carrying a sense of spontaneity that contrasted with the more controlled style of traditional Hollywood glamour. Films like And God Created Woman didn't just elevate her fame, they helped reshape how femininity and independence were portrayed in cinema, leaving a lasting cultural impact. What made Bardot truly iconic was not only her appearance, but the spirit she represented. She became a symbol of freedom and individuality during a time of major social change. Her image reflected a generation beginning to challenge expectations and embrace personal expression in new ways. At the peak of her fame, she made the bold decision to step away from acting and live life on her own terms, choosing privacy over constant attention. In later years, she focused on causes she felt strongly about, reflecting a quieter but determined sense of purpose. Brigitte Bardot passed away at the age of 91, but her influence remains deeply rooted in film and culture. She is remembered as an enduring icon of artistic freedom, change, and individuality, whose legacy continues to inspire across generations. Long before the world knew the name Leonardo DiCaprio, he was just a child growing up in one of the roughest corners of East Hollywood. The streets around Hollywood Boulevard were filled with drugs, violence, desperation, and broken dreams. His mother, Irmelin, worked tirelessly to keep food on the table while raising him mostly alone in a cramped apartment surrounded by chaos. Leonardo witnessed arguments, crime, and fear before he was old enough to fully understand them. Yet inside that unstable world, one thing remained constant: his mother's belief that her son could escape it. She took him to auditions across Los Angeles, using multiple buses because they could not afford a car. Sometimes they walked long distances just to save money. Leonardo later admitted that watching his mother sacrifice everything for him created a permanent fire inside him. He did not dream of fame at first, he dreamed of rescue. He wanted to save the woman who gave up her own life so he could have a chance at another one. That promise became the emotional engine behind every decision he would later make in Hollywood, even after wealth and fame changed everything around him forever. Rejection became the language of his childhood. At 12 years old, Leonardo entered an entertainment industry that immediately taught him humiliation. Audition rooms were crowded with wealthier, cleaner, more polished children who looked exactly like what television executives wanted. Leonardo looked different. He carried the energy of someone raised too close to survival. Casting directors dismissed him repeatedly. Some called him ordinary, others believed he lacked charm. For years he heard the same cold sentence, "We'll call you." The calls rarely came, but every rejection only hardened his determination. His mother never allowed failure to become permanent in his mind. She reminded him constantly that persistence mattered more than immediate success. Eventually, small television jobs began appearing, commercials, tiny sitcom appearances, soap operas, enough to pay bills, but not enough to establish respect. Then came the sitcom Growing Pains, where Leonardo finally became visible to mainstream audiences. Yet even during his first taste of success, he felt trapped. Hollywood wanted him to remain a harmless television face instead of a serious actor. Leonardo feared becoming disposable entertainment rather than meaningful art. Behind the smiles and studio lights was a teenager terrified that if he stopped fighting for better roles, he would disappear into mediocrity forever, like countless young actors before him. The young actor who refused to be ordinary. Everything changed in 1993 when Leonardo was cast opposite Robert De Niro in This Boy's Life. The opportunity terrified him. Standing across from one of cinema's greatest actors forced him to confront every insecurity he carried from childhood. He feared being exposed as talentless, inexperienced, and undeserving. But instead of collapsing under pressure, he transformed it into intensity. His performance stunned critics who expected little from a former sitcom actor. Suddenly, Hollywood noticed that beneath the youthful face existed extraordinary emotional depth. That same year, he delivered an even more unforgettable performance in What's Eating Gilbert Grape opposite Johnny Depp. Playing Arnie required complete vulnerability and fearlessness. Leonardo disappeared so fully into the role that audiences stopped seeing acting entirely. At just 19 years old, he earned his first Academy Award nomination. The nomination should have felt like victory, but for Leonardo, it became proof that he belonged among elite actors. Losing the Oscar did not destroy him. Instead, it awakened a dangerous hunger. Recognition no longer felt optional. It became validation for every painful year his mother spent struggling to give him opportunities. Success was no longer about money alone. It became deeply personal, almost psychological. Fame turned him into a global obsession. The release of Romeo plus Juliet transformed Leonardo into a teenage phenomenon, but nothing prepared him for what followed next. When director James Cameron cast him in Titanic, the decision reshaped global pop culture forever. The film exploded beyond anyone's imagination. Leonardo became more than an actor. He became an obsession. Fans screamed outside hotels. Magazines printed his face endlessly. Entire countries treated him like royalty. Yet behind the hysteria, Leonardo felt increasingly trapped. Hollywood no longer saw him as a serious performer. He became, quote, the pretty boy from Titanic. Critics dismissed him as a manufactured heartthrob rather than a genuine artist. The Academy Awards intensified the humiliation when Titanic won 11 Oscars but failed to nominate Leonardo. That omission became a defining wound in his career. To the public, he appeared untouchable, but privately, he felt invisible. Fame had delivered wealth, power, and adoration, while simultaneously stealing credibility. He later admitted the experience nearly destroyed him emotionally. The role that made him one of the most famous people alive also imprisoned him inside an identity he desperately wanted to escape. He feared spending the rest of his career being underestimated despite everything he had already proven. The desperate fight to escape the Titanic curse. After Titanic, Leonardo made career choices driven less by comfort and more by survival. He understood that another romantic blockbuster could permanently bury his artistic reputation. Films like The Man in the Iron Mask and The Beach showed flashes of ambition, but critics remained unconvinced. Hollywood still treated him as a celebrity first and actor second. During this period, Leonardo withdrew from the spotlight emotionally, even while remaining publicly unavoidable. He formed friendships with other young stars and developed a reputation for partying, but beneath that image was someone deeply frustrated by how little control he had over public perception. Then came the partnership that changed his life forever, his collaboration with director Martin Scorsese. Starting with Gangs of New York, Scorsese saw in Leonardo the intensity and discipline critics often overlooked. The Oscar drought became a public spectacle. What began as disappointment slowly transformed into a worldwide joke. Leonardo's repeated Oscar losses became internet memes, television punchlines, and cultural entertainment. Every year, audiences watched him deliver extraordinary performances, only to lose again. Blood Diamond, The Wolf of Wall Street, and The Aviator all generated awards buzz, but the golden statue never arrived. The public sympathy eventually became almost theatrical. People wanted him to win not only because of talent, but because his losses had become emotionally exhausting to witness. Leonardo rarely discussed the pain directly, but those close to him noticed how deeply the failures affected him. Awards should not define greatness, yet Hollywood conditions actors to view them as ultimate validation. Leonardo had spent decades transforming physically and emotionally for roles, only to repeatedly hear another name announced instead of his own. The irony became unbearable. One of the world's most respected actors still seemed incomplete without that trophy. Meanwhile, younger actors won Oscars after only 1 or 2 nominations. The contrast intensified the narrative of injustice surrounding him. What the public treated as entertainment slowly became a psychological burden Leonardo carried into every new performance, every awards season, and every interview where journalists inevitably asked the same painful question again, pushing his body beyond human limits for validation. By the time Leonardo accepted the role in The Revenant, the Oscar narrative had consumed public conversation surrounding him. Directed by Alejandro González Iñárritu, the film demanded brutal physical endurance. Leonardo crawled through frozen landscapes, endured extreme temperatures, slept inside animal carcasses, and ate raw bison liver despite years of avoiding meat. Every story from the production sounded like punishment disguised as filmmaking. Audiences began treating the performance less like art and more like a test of suffering worthy of Academy approval. The memes intensified. Social media turned his desperation for an Oscar into global comedy, yet underneath the jokes existed something tragic. Leonardo appeared determined to prove himself through pain. It was as though decades of rejection convinced him that talent alone would never be enough. He had to suffer publicly to finally receive recognition. When he ultimately won the Academy Award in 2016, the audience erupted with relief more than surprise. His speech focused partly on climate change, revealing how disconnected he already felt from the shallow triumph everyone else celebrated. The environmental activist living inside contradictions. Outside cinema, Leonardo spent decades building an image as one of Hollywood's most vocal environmental activists. Through the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, he funded conservation projects, rainforest protection, wildlife preservation, and climate initiatives around the world. He spoke passionately at international conferences and used his fame to push environmental awareness into mainstream conversation. To many supporters, he became more than an actor. He became a symbol of celebrity activism with genuine purpose. Yet his lifestyle often contradicted his message. Critics repeatedly pointed out his use of private jets, luxury yachts, and carbon-heavy travel. The contradiction created uncomfortable questions about whether global fame itself makes authentic environmental responsibility impossible. Leonardo never fully escaped those accusations. His defenders argued that his advocacy accomplished measurable good, regardless of personal imperfection. His critics claimed he represented elite hypocrisy. The tension reflected a larger truth about his life. Leonardo constantly occupied 2 realities at once. He was both sincere activist and global celebrity, compassionate humanitarian and ultra-wealthy icon. Perhaps that contradiction explains why he often seemed emotionally restless. Even his greatest causes could not completely shield him from public skepticism. The same world that admired him also scrutinized him endlessly, turning every private decision into evidence either for or against the complicated image he spent decades constructing. Love, aging, and the fear of permanent attachment. Leonardo's romantic life became another strange cultural phenomenon. For years, tabloids mocked the pattern that many of his relationships appeared to end once girlfriends reached their mid-20s. Models, actresses, and socialites entered his orbit, yet very few relationships lasted long enough to suggest permanence. The internet transformed his dating history into another ongoing joke, reducing complex human relationships into simplistic headlines about age limits and commitment issues. But beneath the humor may exist something darker and more human. Leonardo grew up surrounded by instability, emotional absence, and financial uncertainty. Fame amplified those insecurities rather than healing them. Long-term attachment requires vulnerability, consistency, and trust, qualities difficult to preserve when the entire world watches every interaction through cameras and gossip columns. While many of his peers built families, Leonardo remained emotionally elusive. He seemed comfortable with companionship, but uncomfortable with permanence. Some observers viewed him as immature. Others believed he feared losing freedom after spending his entire life trapped by expectations. His relationships reflected the same pattern visible throughout his career: endless movement without emotional arrival. He conquered Hollywood yet struggled to create a stable private life beyond it. The world saw luxury, beauty, and privilege, but behind those headlines may have existed a man still carrying the survival instincts of the frightened boy who once watched his exhausted mother sacrifice everything just to keep hope alive. The prison hidden behind extraordinary success. To the public, Leonardo DiCaprio represents ultimate success: wealth, fame, respect, influence, and artistic achievement beyond imagination. Yet his story also reveals how fame can quietly become imprisonment. From childhood onward, Leonardo learned to measure his worth through performance, validation, and relentless ambition. Every stage of his life reinforced the idea that survival depended on proving himself repeatedly. Even after becoming one of cinema's greatest stars, he never seemed entirely free from the fear of losing relevance. The Academy's repeated rejection intensified that insecurity until public approval became inseparable from personal identity. This is why his eventual Oscar victory felt strangely anticlimactic. The trophy ended the narrative, but not the emptiness beneath it. Leonardo had spent decades chasing recognition, only to discover that achievement cannot automatically heal emotional wounds formed in childhood. The world continued worshipping him after the Oscar exactly as before. The applause changed nothing fundamental inside him. In many ways, the role he played longest was not Jack Dawson, or Hugh Glass, or Jordan Belfort. It was the role of Leonardo DiCaprio himself, global icon, untouchable celebrity, artistic perfectionist. Maintaining that image required endless discipline and emotional distance. The richer and more famous he became, the harder it likely became to remember who he was before the cameras turned him into mythology. The real legacy hidden beneath the Hollywood myth, Leonardo DiCaprio's story, is ultimately not about an Oscar, a blockbuster, or even fame itself. It is about transformation and the cost attached to it. A child raised in poverty fought his way into an industry built to reject people like him. He became one of the greatest actors of his era through obsession, discipline, and emotional intensity that few performers could sustain for decades. But every victory carried consequences. Fame stole privacy, success created pressure, admiration turned into expectation. The world watched him so closely that even his failures became entertainment. Yet despite the contradictions, the jokes, and the endless scrutiny, Leonardo endured. He survived an industry that destroys most child actors. He escaped the trap of being remembered only as a teenage heartthrob. He built a filmography filled with risk, ambition, and artistic courage. More importantly, he never forgot the frightened boy from East Hollywood or the mother who carried him across Los Angeles, believing his life could become something larger. Perhaps that is the real reason audiences remain fascinated by him. Beneath the celebrity mythology exists someone profoundly human, insecure, driven, lonely, passionate, contradictory, and still searching for meaning long after achieving everything society claims should make a person complete.